Call the meeting of Boothbay Selectmen to order. First on the agenda would be the public hearing regarding the Boothbay Region Water District and Town of Southport merger.
Thank you very much. My name is John Ziegler. I'm the manager of the Boothbay Region Water District. In the audience is one of my bosses, Trustee Ken Marston. He lives in Boothbay. Smith Climo and Jerry Gamage, they are water commissioners over at Southport. About 2 years ago, we got together, Boothbay Region Water District and the Southport water system. We got together and just discussed, maybe would it make sense to put the two systems together. We have a lot of common problems and a lot of common goals. That kicked off a long, formal process where we formed a committee to look at the reasons for merging. And after about a good 6 or 8 months of studying, it was obvious that merging the two made a lot of sense. We went to the legislature because we're a regulated utility. We have a charter. We had to change our charter. LD 1834 was passed earlier this year. It was an act to amend the Boothbay Region Water District Charter. And as part of that, to amend it, it was to add all of Southport into the system, into the Region Water District. And it would require a vote of ratification from all 3 towns, Boothbay, Boothbay Harbor, and Southport. The question will be, do you favor allowing the Boothbay Region Water District to provide water to the town of Southport and acquire assets of the Southport water system? And it will happen on the 6th of November on all 3 ballots. If it passes, then they shortly thereafter will start moving Southport into the district. What will change is really the district will get 2 new trustees to start off. The 2 trustees will be appointed by the selectmen, and Jerry and Smith also happen to be selectmen and commissioners. They'll have 2 new trustees that will come in and serve partial terms until the subsequent trustees are elected by popular vote on the town of Southport. Southport also, and this is a great town to talk about, this Knickerbocker Lake and Adams Pond is the water resource for the entire region. Currently, Southport for the last 15 years has been buying wholesale water from what we produce at the Adams Pond treatment plant, but they've had very little to say about how the resources are protected or how they're used. This will give them a seat to that table, and currently we pay for half a CEO position in this town, and that's simply to look after the protection of the water sources and take care of any things that might come up. The district will also increase. We're currently at about 2,800 customers. We'll go to about 3,320 customers. And we'll grow substantially. We're about 79 miles of main right now. We'll be up over 108 miles of main when it's said and done. But also our customer to employee ratio, which you want to keep up around 300 to be as efficient as possible, will go from 281 to 369, which means for every 1 employee, we'll have 369 customers, spreading the cost of that employee over a wider base and being less of a burden on the customers. The principal reason why we're doing this is fire protection. That's the reason why we were formed in the late 1800s. When Boothbay Harbor burned down, that's also the reason why the towns of Boothbay and Boothbay Harbor split, because of paying for the water system, and now the water systems have come back together, the towns stay apart, but that's okay. But currently, one of the prime motivating factors for Southport is it's a town about 13 square miles. It's got quite a few houses on there. It's currently only served with 2 year-round fire hydrants. Fire protection is a big deal for them, and they don't have a lot of it. And being a small system and the amount of capital that it would take to do it, it was kind of infeasible for them to take it on by themselves, not being part of a bigger entity. contrast to that, by us gaining Southport, it gives us just that much more momentum so that we can do a lot of work there, but also a lot of our goals system-wide, which is in the town of Boothbay and the town of Boothbay Harbor. I'll get into that in a second. Right off the bat, though, we're deficient for parts of the town of Boothbay and pretty much all of Boothbay Harbor in water storage. Town of Southport comes and offers us a height of land that's equal to Pisgah's, or within a couple of feet, which that's the only place that exists. We will be constructing, if the merger goes forward, a 500,000 gallon reservoir on that on that height of land, and that'll meet the ISO ratings for a good portion of Boothbay and all of Boothbay Harbor, which has been deficient for years. And for the town, for the selectmen, currently our operations costs, 30% of it's paid in fire protection rates for the towns. Currently it's split on a 60-40 split between the towns of Boothbay Harbor and Boothbay Harbor picking up the 60%. By adding Southport, and they know this, their eyes are wide open coming in, especially as things get converted out there, they're going to be asked to pick up a percentage of that fire protection cost. That will come directly off of Boothbay and Boothbay Harbor's share. And it's just fairness. It's how much infrastructure is installed in which town. Southport also, another motivating factor is the groundwater in Southport's notorious for being poor. Inorganic and organic chemicals is naturally occurring. They have a couple of municipal buildings that have a very unsteady water source that they would like to correct, the school being one of them. And this will lead to that happening. A merger will lead to that happening. For everybody, this is going to give us, increase our financial stability. Having more customers paying the existing are one of the realities of operating this utility is we fund depreciation through debt. It's kind of weird that way, but we have to borrow money to maintain our bigger projects, and in that we've done very well. We've picked up about $7 million or $8 million worth of debt in the last 10 years. Well, we currently have $8.4 million worth of debt, but we've done right around $14 million worth of work because we get a lot of grants. And that we look to continue that. A bigger organization also frees up money for more work that's needed as part of our regular maintenance program. And it'll provide greater rate stability. Currently our rates aren't bad. They're not the lowest in the state. They're certainly not the highest, but by spreading our operations costs over a larger group, it'll keep the rates stable for a longer period of time. And that's one of the goals of the trustees, is to keep rates as stable as possible. And lastly, but some of the capital improvement projects, it won't just be on Southport, and that's not just the reason why we're doing this. It'll open up a lot of stuff for all of us. We're at the point now where we've done so much maintenance that we can start looking at converting some of our seasonal main in really targeted areas where the fire protection is really critical, and start turning that into year-round main, putting hydrants in the ground, and making it safer, ISO ratings safer for certain parts. One that comes to mind is Spruce Wold in Boothbay Harbor. It's critical to get a fire line up there. This will open up capital to do that. Also, Route 27 north of Big Al's in the town of Boothbay is another targeted area that this will help fund going up, and eventually we wouldn't be going into the industrial park, but it'll make that be able to happen when the town, if the town goes up there. So anyway, lastly, this complies with initiatives not only by Governor LePage but Governor Baldacci as well, to regionalize and consolidate. This will be a total consolidation of the region's water districts under one roof. We believe through the work that we've done, and I'm speaking now for the trustees and commissioners, that this is a pretty good deal for everybody. It makes a lot of sense, and we're urging you to vote for it on November 6th. And I'll take any questions.
How will this affect the workforce, the maintenance workforce?
Well, we'll
You're gonna do it all with the same number of people you have right now?
Well, we'll hire out, the only thing that we can't do is seasonal turn on and shut down at Southport. And we've already made arrangements to, up to 2 weeks in the spring and up to 2 weeks in the fall to hire the town of Southport's water system's been very well maintained. They got really knowledgeable people over there maintaining it and working, and that will work with us. So we'll hire that particular function out, but we won't be hiring them on a permanent basis. And really, yeah, we can absorb that system by that type of arrangement.
I was looking for the economies of consolidation.
And that would be, they would only be working 2 to 4 weeks a year instead of working the whole year on the water system, those 2 people.
No other questions?
Lively bunch.
So in front of you, we discussed whether this is under the agenda as old business, BRWD Southport Water merger, but traditionally you guys will take up action right after a public hearing if there is action to be had. So in front of you, there's a warrant for referendum election. As we've been given from Maine Rural Water, which I'm sure has been funneled through John and the Water District. So if you were so inclined, you would have a motion to sign the warrant, which we would then deliver tomorrow. We've actually already received the ballots.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Is it easy?
Copy is the original.
Top one, Chuck.
I should save that. That is it for the public hearing.
So that will be the only local question at the November 6th election.
Next is the approval of the minutes from previous meeting 9/10/2012 and 8/22/2012. Why do we have a 9/20? 9/10, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's a typo. We should have September 10th is what you have in front of you.
Okay, so the 8/22
Is not needed.
Thanks, Bob.
Sorry. I just need I need a motion to approve the minutes of 9/10.
So moved.
No discussion?
I didn't see any questions.
All those in favor?
Okay. I'm gonna have you go slow for and take a minute.
Okay. Next is public comment.
Can't believe there is none.
There isn't? Okay. Reports, Jim.
Okay. Some of the categories here in my reports I'll get inventive in because I was putting stuff together at the last minute. The first thing that I wanted to report on is in your information packets, which you only got today. I'm sorry they weren't there earlier. Is a letter of agreement that we put with the Woodchucks group. You see that Mr. Rowe, who's here tonight, signed as the representative for the Woodchucks group. And essentially what we've done is at town meeting, $600 was appropriated for the Woodchucks group. And in order to try to find a way to best use that money, the town set up an account or a key, I guess, on the town's account at the fuel depot so they can use the fuel depot to use their $600. If they use the entirety of the $600, we'll essentially just transfer the funds from one town account into the fuel account. If they don't use the entire amount, then we'll have a warrant for you guys to issue a check to the Woodchucks group. The Woodchucks like this because they have pretty solid accountability. They're not paying as much as they would for fuel if they were paying straight market price. And they can do that because it's through our fuel depot. So I just want to make sure that that was reported on, considering we'll have another user of the fuel depot.
Good.
The second thing, this is more, I needed a discussion about the Columbus Day meeting, which should be October 8th. Dennis's head is right in front of it, but I think it's the 8th, right? Well, that would be our regularly scheduled meeting for October, the first meeting in October. And that's obviously Columbus Day. The Tuesday after that is when we'd historically have the meeting, but that will be a task force meeting night. So if it's okay with the Board of Selectmen, I would recommend that we just continue to have the meeting on Columbus Day.
I'm okay with it. Are you busy?
It's fine with me.
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Okay.
Chuck, you said was okay with Monday night as well, right?
Yes. And I was going to call around earlier today because we were trying to set up a Wars and Weirs for approval that night. I just told Amber to book it for that day, so I'm glad you guys said yes. The next under my reports, this is a real quick one. I just put in your packets an email that I had from John O'Donnell. Most of the conversations that we've had is via phone, but he mentioned something in an email to me that I just thought should be pointed out. As we're discussing a contract extension with O'Donnell because of all the work that they've encountered in their first year with us, they've been really great to deal with. They're not anxious to nail down this contract. They just really want long-term work with the town of Boothbay. But the last paragraph which they state, you and the board are fair and reasonable. And I want to point out that Mike, who is our local assessor that's been working in the town, speaks with Boothbay property owners on the issues. The owners are patient and understanding. So, I mean, our new assessor is pointing out that we have flaws, but he's also pointing out where our property owners have been really, really patient and understanding as we iron out some of the flaws.
Good.
The audit update is pretty simple. I've received the draft audit and reviewed it, and it takes a little while. You guys have read the audits before. And right now I'm probably about 20% of the way through the management's discussion and analysis. As soon as I have that done, I'll submit that to Don Talbot, who will then put it all together, and then we'll try to arrange a meeting to have a discussion of the formal audit with the Board of Selectmen. I know that seems like
How soon?
If we had less to do, the MD&A would already be done. I'm the bottleneck right now. As soon as I'm done, I bet it would probably only take another month after that.
So we're still probably 6 weeks from getting an audit.
Yeah, and it's really mostly our fault. I mean, we keep slowing down the process.
Okay.
Department head reports. We canceled our department head meeting after it was about 15 minutes too late. Mike wasn't going to be available anyway. Mike's out this week. He had already reported last week on the things that Public Works was up to. They're now out of building stage, but not yet into prep for winter stage yet. So they're doing a lot of cutting and clearing and a lot of catch up, a lot of ditching for roads that we may end up doing work on next year. So we're getting ahead of where we were, which is much better than playing from behind like we were doing before. A lot of people have been coming in for absentee ballots at the business office, and they're not ready. And our local ballot is available, but I guess we're not giving that out until the state ones are available. And the state hasn't issued ballots yet. I know it's 44 days prior to election, and they should have them by now, but we haven't received them, so we can't give them out.
Is there a date they have to have them ready by?
I think by law they're supposed to have them 45 days prior to. So I don't know. But I guess if you're the state of Maine and it's your law, then
You can make it if you want to.
I guess so. We put in a couple of inquiries, and I'm sure the ballots will be in shortly. The other point that I wanted to do under department head or the department head reports is that we had correspondence from the planning board, and I see we have members of the planning board here, so maybe you can help us with the discussion on this. A memo from the planning board to the Board of Selectmen regarding the the authorization that you've given to administration to do redrafting of the zoning ordinance. Any topic of discussion, or does the planning board want to speak on this while we're on the topic?
I can only speak for us. I mean, I guess it was about a month ago now, during one of our regular meetings, it was brought up, what started the discussion was a driveway permit. Something so simple is considered a structure in our ordinance, which makes absolutely no sense to me. And I guess it did to all of us.
Correct.
So it was recommended that we had staff go through, I mean, because they deal with them every day, and pick out the quirks, if you will, of the ordinance and make up a list, and then they would report back. There was no trying to go around the planning board. I don't want to make it sound like we was at all, because I don't believe that was any of our intentions.
Absolutely.
That it would come to you anyways, long before it would ever get approved. I mean, it just seemed like it made sense to have the people that did it every day. I'm not saying you guys don't, but you guys have jobs, just like we have jobs. That is their job, to be able to do something like that. So it made sense to pay them to do it. That was the intent of it.
Yes.
Mike Payne, I'm the vice chair of the planning board. On its face, that does make all the sense in the world. I want to explain away the driveway structure thing. Under state law, that's not our ordinance. Under state law, that's how that was applied. We didn't write that. The town of Boothbay, the folks, and I was one of them, who wrote this, did not call the driveway a structure. There's no way you're going to get out of this book, no matter what. On its face, it doesn't make any sense at all. So that kind of explains that one away. It does kind of not make sense. We just use a common definition of the word structure. Over a year ago, the planning board went through the book. We had a series of workshops. We've kind of done this one time already. It's what led to the single change in the ordinance that we voted on at town meeting last May, I guess it was last spring. The other recommendations, which actually broadened uses widely throughout the town, expanded uses did not diminish uses, expanded uses widely. In a common sense look, that's kind of what we did. We were pretty much shut down due to the busyness of the town and so forth, and it was kind of put aside, so it's kind of been done. That was shared with the town manager at the time. The other comments, and we're sorry we're not better represented. We have a representative in Colorado, we have one in California, we've got two that are sick.
My
One's
God,
anniversary.
Nancy's here.
Oh, hi, Nancy.
She sounds like she's...
But in talking amongst ourselves, if we're going to review this, we're the folks that actually end up using it at planning board related matters. Certainly the CEO uses it day to day for building permit matters, to be sure. Historically, the planning board is deeply involved in any rewrite of this. Our fear is this. Folks come up with ideas about changing and so forth, and they become their ideas. And maybe we agree, we probably will agree. If we don't agree, all of a sudden we're dealing with, gee, that's not a good idea, and we're debating ideas. As opposed to all of us being in one room, coming up with one idea at one time, it's more efficient, and we all come up with the same idea around the same table. That's all. We're not trying to delay it at all. We'll find a way to do it together. We'd rather do it as a team as opposed to doing it in pieces and then trying to put those pieces together and maybe they don't fit. We'll find a way to make it work. And the team, again, talking with other members of the board, the team is the town manager and the CEO's office, the selectmen, and the planning board. It's kind of the way it's always been and always should be. But once you start monkeying with this public document, it affects every resident in town. So it can't be done by a couple of guys sitting around in an office. It just shouldn't be done that way.
But it wouldn't be. With all due respect, it wouldn't be. I mean,
Well, I didn't mean to brush it aside that way.
Right, no,
Certainly any review, any suggestion, absolutely. But an overall review should be more than...
But I think that's what we're asking for, is basically a suggestion.
Yeah.
We want them to go through and definitely find the hot items, the ones that always rear up their ugly heads and make no sense, and Go ahead, Nancy. Your hand's been up twice, so I'm not gonna stop you
I just
again.
want to say it was really kind of blindsided us. I only found out about this from, I talked to Jim the other night. And I thought when we had our last meeting, joint meeting with everybody, that we were gonna have better communication. I mean, I think that's the thing that upset us all the most, is we didn't know this was going on. We have a whole list of items that we have, applications that have come before us that have been issues that we want to address. We have a whole list that we've been working on, but we put aside, the staffing changes and things like that. It would have been nice to just have a meeting ahead of time so that we could hand off some of that. And it just blindsided us. I just found out last week.
Well, it was, in our defense, I mean, it was kind of, I hate to use the word on a whim, but it was. I mean, we were sitting here discussing some of the quirks of the ordinance, but don't even make me try to believe, I have no clue about them, I'll be the first to tell you that. But some of the things that you hear, well, geez, little quirks of it makes perfect sense. So when we've got Art that's been to several different towns, it made sense for him that's going to be able to look at not only ours, but how other towns do it as well. It made perfect sense to us, and that's the only reason why we did it. There was no trying to skirt around.
I understand that. I just think that it would have been nice to come before our planning board and let us, put it out there and let us know about it. I think we'd all learn from Art tremendously.
Will we be paying Art for this review?
He's already on payroll.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing it while he's here.
Well, actually,
Will
we're
he
doing,
be staying on any longer to do this project?
yes, but remotely, which is the reason why we wanted to do it in a proposal type format and not in a meeting type format, because we're not going to pay Art to come on site anymore. We're going to essentially have him do his review from Poland in the winter, and then him and I are going to share electronically so that we can get a proposal then to bring to the planning board to have you guys analyze in a meeting format.
What will that cost the town?
I don't
Art's,
know. What's that?
I don't know.
No, I'm sorry. I was Art's hourly rate, which I'm not sure it is right off the top of my head, but when we're not paying the MRI rate on top of it, I think it's like $35 an hour.
How many hours will you allocate for this?
We're not sure yet. We're gonna see how the first part of the review goes, but we're playing a lot of this by ear. I want to see what comes up as we're doing the review. And Art's done, I think he said a quarter of his review while he's been here on site, and he actually leaves the town of Boothbay in a week and a half from his actual 3 to 4 days a week that he's been here. So.
I think I'm Jean Fuller and I'm a member of the planning board. I think we want the same thing that you do. And as Nancy said and Mike said, we have a list that we have an ongoing list for the past couple of years of the issues that we've had with things coming before us that Art doesn't know about and none of you know about because you really haven't been here long. We've been dealing with it. And there are issues regarding the things you all want to fix, having businesses go through the process more easily. What I see personally as one of the big issues is the intent of the ordinance as trying to be more business friendly, and it states that in the beginning. I think that was actually quoted in the newspaper maybe this week. But the ordinances actually don't go along with that, and that's one of the big problems. The ordinances do a lot of restricting unnecessarily, perhaps, and those are the things we've been looking at. We want to involve contractors as well, and I think that's been brought up. And I think all of us getting together is really the best way to do it. With contractors, with the selectmen.
So I'm hearing an absolute opposition to letting Art and Jim have a shot at it. It's still got to go before your scrutiny. I mean, nothing's going to get approved without having the planning board review it.
I know what you're saying, but I think you will miss out on. We will have to go through a whole nother stage because they will miss out on things that we have on our list.
Well, I get,
Then why don't you bring us up to date with the list is, and we can look at
We,
it too,
we,
you know?
we did
I
give
mean,
the
that's
list,
what, that's what we're here for.
we gave the list to Dan at our last
Yeah,
meeting.
I mean, that's what we're here for, so we
Right.
we can make some judgments on what we should
Well,
be,
we,
we
as
should
I
be
said,
doing.
we did give the list to Dan at our
I
last
mean,
meeting.
no sense keeping it, if you had it for 2 years, ain't no sense keeping it. You should give us some leeway so we know what's going on.
Yeah, for the sequence of events, so you know that we weren't keeping it a secret whatsoever. That list is a continuation of the complete review we did of the ordinances well over a year ago. It's an extension of it. And these are things that we put off due to staffing issues and time issues and so forth. There's no secret involved whatsoever. And indeed, the CEO's office has our ongoing list that Nell has studiously kept.
Maybe you ought to give us, the board, and give us a list, you know.
You have it right now.
Keep us up to date.
I have it on my desk.
Okay.
yeah, and honestly, the list is great. I mean, I think the list is wonderful. One of the things I think that we definitely as a distinction, or at least as far as I'm concerned, I'm out on the field every day, and these contractors, builders, dirt diggers, plumbers, electricians, everybody that needs these things changed, want it changed faster than 2 years. And it's nice that you've had a list in your possession for 2 years, but I think they'd like to see action a little bit sooner.
Well,
Nancy?
Well,
It really hasn't
we had
been
a
2 years. I mean, we just did the review recently. Code enforcement has had the ongoing list of different applications that have come before us. Unfortunately, staffing has changed, and that probably hasn't carried over.
Okay.
We actually tried to make the list come before at the last town meeting,
Okay.
but for some reason, and I'm not really sure why, we were not allowed to bring it before the last town meeting. I don't really know why.
At last town
We
meeting,
had it
there
all
was
set to
one
go.
zoning change.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Had it been up to the planning board, there would have been many, which would have expanded uses, which would have done a lot of the things that you're talking about. They would have been done last May. But we were put off, just put it off, that's why they weren't on there.
Well, I have to beg the question, why?
I don't,
Yeah, who,
A lot of those changes were to the industrial park zone, and we were dealing with the bigger issue of the fact that the industrial park zone.
Yes.
a lot of them weren't. We went through all the districts. We went through the general residential, the C1, C2, C3. And basically, somehow, I don't know how it came about, but we were told not to put any of them before. They were all there.
I don't have my, we'll share that,
Yeah.
if you like.
Nancy?
Can I just make a suggestion that maybe what we could do is, before Art leaves, have just a meeting ahead with the planning board? We can relay what we've worked on and maybe a midpoint meeting and then something at the end. I mean, then it would, at least it's not reworking so much. I think that's a compromise.
I'm all for it.
Yeah,
I
I
just-
think that's actually a great idea.
I just thought to keep our lines of communication open, I know that that's what we talked about this past
Absolutely.
spring. And it, like I said, it blindsided us that, and unfortunately, I know my husband's on the board of selectmen, but we try to keep that very separate because we think very differently. So he doesn't relay what goes on in the meetings to me.
Perception is everything, but it was not intended to be. I mean,
I understand that.
And this was a discussion that just happened, a meeting ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 meetings ago.
And really, we wanted to get a little bit underneath our belts, because Art and I haven't had a moment to do the actual review. We're waiting until October ticks around and then Art goes away. He doesn't have to focus on the day-to-day of code enforcement, and he can actually focus on the review. And what we're doing is we're taking a lot of different ordinances from different towns and seeing how they apply some of the same standards that we apply, and trying to come up with ideas. What we're thinking that we would do is we take the entire zoning ordinance and then we would take our comments and our recommendations and put them together in a full proposal that we could then get the blessing of the Board of Selectmen to give to the planning board. And the planning board has the opportunity to add, amend, change any of our proposal as it sees fit. But there's a lot of flexibility that Art and I can have just working back and forth. I would probably represent economic development in the town of Boothbay. He would represent an enforcement perspective. And then the planning board, after we're done our proposal, will get to represent your own views that you see as a planning perspective. So it's not like we're cutting anybody out. We're actually just being innovative on the way that we created the amendment.
Is your intention to have something before the prepared for town meeting in the spring?
I would like to think so.
I'd like to think so, but I mean, obviously, if it takes on this monster view and it gets out of hand, then I would report back to the board as soon as we have some progress.
But I don't think it's out of the question, Jim, to, before Art leaves, to have him meet with the planning board. I think that makes perfect sense.
The hardest thing there is that Art is doing a second town. He is retired and he's trying to retreat, and we actually are very good at working with Art's schedule to just get him in here on a day-to-day basis. So you find I'm trying to compensate for the fact that Art is a value to have here. We're trying to find inventive ways to make sure he's readily available for the town. I'd have to get inventive to find him a night meeting that he could come to. I'm sure he'd come. He gets paid a pretty healthy fee, so I'm sure he'd come.
I'm okay with paying him. I think it makes more sense to get everybody at the same table.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll find that Art's work will be diminished once you review the proposals that were submitted last year. So I think we can indeed make town meeting in May.
I mean, we just felt that, I mean, his approach would be different than our approach, your approach, because, I mean, he's done other towns. He's been there, done that in several towns, and he's he's still relatively new, so he's an outsider looking in, whereas you guys work with him every day. He may have a different look at it than you and I would, because I wouldn't know what I'm looking at, I'll be honest. But you guys work with him every day, so it made sense to us. That was the reason why we said, yeah, let's go ahead and do it. That was the only reason why we did it.
Yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of beauty to the fact that Art brings an outside perspective, multi-town perspective. I know the outsiders are not always appreciated for their perspective, but he's not jaded in any way. There's not going to be any political motivation behind any review that he has. He's going to give us simple, equitable ways to enforce law, which is what I'm really interested in. And then to measure it against other towns, you know, I'd like to see what their review looks like. And I'm not promising that we've reshaped the world in any way, because we haven't actually started this proposal in its fullest form. But Art has already started some of the internal parts of code enforcement and helping us get on track. He's been pretty impressed with some of the things that we started with previous personnel, the software that we accumulated to keep track of raw data. He likes all that stuff, and he's given us this really neat ways to use it. So we want to take advantage of them while we have them. We won't have them forever.
So can we set up a meeting with Art and the planning board at some time in the near future?
Certainly.
And I think lack of a better term, midway meeting.
A midterm?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who's going to dictate what's midterm, but
And I think Dan will be part of these as well.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, we don't want to put Dan in the hot seat yet. But Dan, every time we say Art, we mean Art and Dan.
that's fine.
And that's the way we've done all code enforcement for the last month or so. When we speak Art, we're really talking Art and Dan. And Art's played a huge mentoring role for Dan, and Dan's coming up to speed quickly. Matter of fact, I think he takes his LPI test this week.
Good.
And I apologize for any of the delivery in the planning board if there was any miscommunication. We're juggling multiple tasks and doing the best we can.
Is that satisfactory?
That's fine.
You still have more reports?
I do still have more reports. I was going to formulate some words, but I ran out of time. I ran out of minutes. But obviously, there's been a lot of press coverage and probably a lot of people speaking in your ears about the Stimson Marine notice of violation. I see Mr. Stimson and his son in here tonight. A few words of caution that I've spread through email is that the way a notice of violation goes through its normal process is they have an appeal period, which I think the Stimsons are going to take full advantage of and apply for appeal. If the appeal is upheld, then eventually the decision to take that to enforcement through a court of law is back to the Board of Selectmen. That's why we're very particular on the amount of information that the Board of Selectmen has, because we don't want to sway your vote when you actually have to have a vote. So that's why the Board of Selectmen doesn't get involved in enforcement issues until it's formally brought to the Board of Selectmen. I know there's probably a lot of information out of that about the notice of violation. Some of it's probably true, some of it's probably not true. I probably touched base with every single one of you at some point in time, but I just caution the Board of Selectmen to let the appeals process take its shape and take its form. We do have very good reasons for the notice of violation. We're not, the town of Boothbay is not trying to be heavy-handed with Mr. Stimson. But also the notice of violation is not the first attempt to work with Mr. Stimson, nor is it the last attempt to work with Mr. Stimson. And we met earlier this evening to talk about any means that there might be available between the town and Mr. Stimson on mitigating this before it involves much more legal fees. And then I'd also like to give Mr. Stimson an opportunity to speak if he chooses so. Tonight I see he's shown up, and I'm sure he didn't show up just to watch our meeting. But I'd caution the Board of Selectmen on how much involvement you get in this. Mr. Stimson, would you like an opportunity, or not tonight, or it's up
I
to you?
appreciate the opportunity. I don't know, without an attorney here, I don't know whether I'd be able to say the right thing, or at least in a way that would be taken the way it should be.
I think that's probably wise.
Understandable.
Once again, patience to the entire community while we try to get through the process. The law is not always easy to understand, and enforcement of the law is definitely not always easy to understand, and the appeals process is very complicated to understand. So just the community have a little patience while we try to figure this out.
If I might just make a statement about that, the manufacturing definition that is in the code, that is another thing that we talked about at our planning board meeting as being very vague and broad, and something that needed to be worked on. And I know that directly affects this. We had problems with that as well.
Probably the basis of the, Sally would tell me to shut up right now, but probably the basis of the conversation that Mr. Stimson and I have is some of the vagueness in the ordinance, and maybe some of that we can come to terms so that he can get back to work into a consent agreement until some of that can be flushed out. If there's nothing left on that, any questions? Finally, the St. Andrews Task Force, which is an animal on itself, and like I keep telling you guys, taking up a tremendous amount of effort by the town, but a lot of good things that are happening through the task force. Bruce McDonald's group met tonight, and I wasn't part of the meeting because I was getting ready for this meeting, but I think that they've had some victories. The legal aspect of that, we've had some victories, and then the fundraising aspect of that, we've had tremendous amount of victories. The McAvoy Foundation has just done a $5,000 matching grant, so for every dollar that the town fundraises, they will give a dollar up to $5,000 in $1,000 increments. That press release that we let out just last week made a real impact. We probably collected about $2,700 in the last day or two. So the total amount of the St. Andrews Project fund is up to $11,472 as of date, and that's without $2,000 or $3,000 from the McAvoy Foundation, which we've already raised. So they'll probably be in about the $15,000 range.
It's impressive.
That's all I have for reports.
Okay. Old business.
Steve, before we go on, may I make a comment?
Sure.
3.5 years ago, as you know, I asked a question to the Human Resources Board. Who's taking care of the wood needs for the peninsula? And I looked around and it's dead silence. So that's how the woodchucks got started. And to date, now in 3.5 years, we've delivered 143 loads of wood, and our season is just starting now. And so I would publicly like to say that I'm as pleased as hell to the support that the town has given us and the Board of Selectmen also. It feels good.
I think you folks should be commended for the community service that you provide.
Absolutely.
You're keeping a lot of families warm.
We're very selfish about that because medically it is keeping us alive for another couple of years.
You know, Henry, on a side note, I get to look over there and see you folks quite often, and I don't think I've seen anybody that don't have gray or white hair working over there. So,
Well, it's a sign of the times.
yes.
Young people don't know how to work anymore.
Not yet.
Okay, Sawyer's Island Road property.
As I put in your memos, it gets a little bit complicated. We started doing research on the Sawyer's Island Road property that the board discussed about putting out to bid. In doing the research, we obviously had to go in touch with our attorney Daggett, and we looked over the authority, which is where we always start off on sale of property. Usually in your annual town meeting warrant, there's some boilerplate language that gives the Board of Selectmen authority to sell property. And when the admin code was adopted, they took that boilerplate out of the annual town meeting. So technically, to get authority to sell deeded property in the town of Boothbay, you actually have to go back to town meeting to ask for that permission. It could be a vague permission, to give the Board of Selectmen authority to buy or sell property as they see fit, which is up to town meeting if they want to go that vague or go individually on properties. In the admin code, it says that the Board of Selectmen has the authority to sell tax acquired property. So you have that authority set by ordinance automatically. Now, why does that make a difference? Well, the Sawyer's Island property is obviously deeded property. It's not tax acquired property. Other properties that we've sold in the past year, like the one we did with Mr. Lewis, that was tax acquired property. So it's a very distinct difference, and we need town meeting authority in order to do that. I know that we're ramping up to possibly have a special town meeting this winter. That might be the appropriate time to ask for that kind of permission, but I wanted to make sure that the Board of Selectmen knew that while we were doing our research. And I know the timeline to sell was hoping to be aggressive, but just to have a town meeting, a special town meeting, is going to slow it down just a little bit.
So that didn't even go up to bid.
It hasn't. We are stuck right now. I mean, we're still doing deed research, and then we find out that we have authority issues. The question's not really hard. It's the one that
Right. I remember.
we can throw it together real quick.
And it's one that's silly to have a special town meeting to dispose of one.
No.
But what that did lead to is I've been working with our assessor to inventory all the town property that we have, and we've started that process. I know that's messy. There's a lot of property that the town of Boothbay owns. This list is a little bit merged with the cemetery properties. So right now what we're doing is we're going one by one and making sure that we can figure out which property is which, so that we can do a full inventory to the board. And then if we do decide to do sale of town properties, that we've identified the purposes of properties that we're going to retain and the reasons why we're not going to retain other pieces of property, and maybe we can do them all at once and do essentially whatever properties the town plans on disposing of in one swift move.
So we'll have that next meeting, hopefully.
I'm working on it. I'm about halfway through that list. It actually is a little bit harder to do than you would first appear. This list was really easy for the assessor to pop out, but then it doesn't really give. The first question I'd be like is, where is this piece of property? What is the purpose? Well, it's hard to tell with map and lot and book and page, so we really have to nail it down.
A lot more property than I thought we had.
Yes. Well, you gotta figure
I know.
town office, fire station, all that's on that
Public
list.
accesses and all this. I got
Yeah,
it.
I mean, and then there's other parts like quarter acre lots that have just been retained, and the purpose of the retaining them may not We may not know them. You guys may know them.
There's two of them down on Farmers Point. Remember we had this discussion a couple, 3 or 4 years ago.
Farm Point.
I mean, Murray Hill, I mean.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
some
one's
small.
like a 4 foot wide,
Right.
50 foot right away to the water, which I don't know who's ever gonna use something 4 feet wide and 50 feet
And
long.
there was a ledge. But it's not really saleable.
But it doesn't. I would argue. I've heard that argument, and I'd say that not saleable property not buildable property doesn't necessarily need to be restrained. I mean, the abutters might be interested in it. Or not.
Oh, no, I think at the time we just kinda made the determination that we don't need it for anything, why hold it?
Right.
Offer it up to either the abutters for purchase or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think it went any farther
If
than
there's two butters, they can split it.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Right.
Henry?
The biggest property in this whole area is the Smith property. It's roughly 23 acres.
26.
It has been off of the tax rolls now for about 12 years. And I was actually involved in the signing of that document when I sat in Steve's chair to the BCA. And the promise was that they would do something with this land. Well, if nothing has been done in 10 or 12 years, that pretty well tells me that nothing will be done. I think it's time that we give some thought to getting back it. I figured there's something like $38,000, $40,000 that we've lost revenue just because the land has been sitting there doing nothing.
Well, that was the purpose of asking to have this list of what we own for property and what. So we can do, I'm not saying just that piece of property, but we want to know what we own. What's doing us no good, I guess is the way to put it.
So I assume that somewhere down the line, there will be decisions that will be made to do this, do that.
Yes. Hopefully sooner rather than later.
I would envision you come up with a purpose for every piece of property that we plan on retaining, even if it's an ambitious purpose. And the property that Mr. Rowe is speaking about is obviously on Wiscasset Road. It's 23.5 acres.
That's the Smith property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this will help bring light to what properties are out there. Not that I think the Smith property is off anybody's radar.
Well, it's awful easy as time goes on with promises being made, and I think there were promises were made in good intentions.
I agree.
But time slips by, and the next thing you know, a decade has gone by.
I believe it was actually town meeting, was it, that approved the agreement between the town and the BCA? Am I wrong in stating that?
No, it's Sputman did it.
No, it was town meeting.
No, it's town meeting.
Was it?
Thought it was.
We had to research it because any multi-year agreement would have to go to town meeting. So we did research it. I got a
There
copy.
was no time involved. It was kind of nebulous and leaving a lot of latitude to do something. But I still say that if nothing's been done, very comfortable.
I agree.
Right.
Stay tuned, Henry.
Thank you. Sir.
Next up is accounting service.
Ongoing discussion about the services of Osmond Page that we've asked for a quote from and discussed how the services apply to the town. And I put together a really short 2-page proposal about how I see us paying for the services. It's not much different than how I explained it verbally at the last meeting. Essentially, we'd have to do some structural changes to the fiscal year 2013 budget, the operating budget that we're in right now. Based on a November 1 start date, we need about $28,800 to launch the Osmond Page services. The way I'm recommended that we get those is we nearly have that funding in our general government from the changes in code enforcement, but I think it's much safer to go to a special town meeting and ask to repurpose the $50,000 in the capital that we put aside for the salt shed. My words that I put in the proposal is that the salt shed is a bit optimistic right now based on the fact that we're getting closer and closer to winter, and we haven't actually realized the time to work on that project anyway. And we can figure out the loss in the capital fund over years. I mean, it's not like we would have to immediately respond to a loss of money in the capital fund. Step 2 is the fiscal year 2014 budget, which is actually easier to do because you start your funding or your budgetary process all over. And we already know that we freed up a substantial amount of money in the general government fund, about $41,000 through restructuring and code enforcement. I put in there that comes mostly from the O'Donnell and Associates contract and efficient structure of new employees. But essentially what I'm saying is O'Donnell's our full-time assessor now. We don't have to pay for their benefits because they're a contracted employee. And essentially the way we've restructured our office now is much cheaper than the way it was running before. So that comes up to about $41,000 that we would save in next year's budget. What we figure that we'll need for funding is $43,200. I think I could find the rest of it in efficiencies and operating. You can see the cost effectiveness chart, which I get a lot of help from Muhammad, which I can tell you it is immediately one of the things that we would find is that we'd suddenly have a lot of help doing these financial analysis items. But over time is what we're talking about, that we're going to essentially find more efficiencies and free up more budget space, and it essentially won't lock up as much money as we're talking about. I know $43,000 is a scary figure, but over time it'll become a more efficient and effective model. Also, in brief discussions that we had with John, I'm glad he stuck around, is the water district has started using Osmond and Page's services, and I think John can give us a testimony on how that's working in a quasi-governmental environment or a municipal environment.
Yeah, we had a retirement kind of come up on us earlier this year, accounts payable and our general bookkeeping services. Coupled with that, we struggled with our it was a bad year last year as far as audit was concerned, due to a lot of different changes, a lot of we're a regulated utility, and there were a lot of things that kind of threw us for a loop. With the retirement that came in, and I mean it's somewhat of a different situation. That was the only function that we couldn't absorb, and we didn't really want to, we wanted to cut labor. And it just so happens we had been talking to Osmond Page, and this is kind of their niche market. It's utilities and municipal stuff. They came in, we're saving a lot of money. The way that we have it structured, we're saving a considerable amount of money, and we had but I wasn't 100% sure, did it for about a 6-month period. We had our auditor come back and do the audit, and we had 100% audit, A+ cert, everything. We're complying with PUC directives, which you don't have to comply with, but I'm sure you have the same in the Maine municipal. Something akin to that. Good accounting practices, all the GASB rules, all of that stuff. They handle our accounts payable, they handle our general bookkeeping, and from a user's perspective, it's easy. It's really easy. And I do all of the interface with them, and it's not really adding any time to my day.
To put you on the spot for a minute, John.
Sure.
Hadn't you had a retirement? If you didn't have a retirement take place, would you have done it?
Possibly.
That gives you a good reason for doing it, though, right?
Right.
I understand.
And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I apologize.
No,
for
that's all right. But yeah, possibly. We were struggling with our accounts payable. We were struggling with our general ledger, and this cured it very quickly. And I don't want to sound super flowery, but we demand a lot from the way we do business. the different divisions, and we strive to be perfect. I mean, it's not attainable goal, but that was one thing that was really driving us nuts, and we're pretty close on our cash accounting and that type of thing. So I mean, from a functionality point of view, if you're having issues, you know, regulatory, that type of stuff, I think they have a service that's really worth taking a good long look at it.
And there's certainly some differences in why the water district was interested in Osmond Page services and why we are. But they had a need, and Osmond Page delivered services. We have a need. It's not lack of manpower. It's you know, it's lack of the ability to maintain our books in the last few years, which has given us kind of a mess. We need to fix that mess as soon as practical. It's one of those things that, right now we're operating in the next fiscal year, and we still haven't really fixed the majority of the complaints that are in our audit.
If you come up with a list of deficiencies, what's going on,
I have this list, which is our audit, and it goes back to that debriefing that I gave the Board of Selectmen a few meetings ago about the fact that our undesignated fund is less than 50% of what we thought it was. That some of our funds are commingled and they should be identified separately. And you know, it's just some things that need some straightening out. Things that we don't have necessarily the skill set in-house to do. We could probably train up, but it's a skill set that we're going to have to maintain over time. I'm not saying the board has to address this tonight, but every time we discuss and don't have action, we're one more week, you know, 2 more weeks into a fiscal year in which we have issues.
I personally would like to see the audit. At least then, you know what I mean, you have it in front of us in black and white, and it's not that I'm not saying I don't trust what you're saying by no means, but to have the audit in front of you is a more compelling case, I guess is the way to put it.
No, I agree. I think the day that we can have Don Talbot sit in here and explain to you the audit will probably be a day that you decide that you'd be willing to pay $43,000.
But that being said, for every day that we're not paying $43,000, we're going further in the hole.
Yes, and we've talked with Mr. Talbot about this approach, and he sounded supportive. He said it was a non-traditional approach. He does not see a lot of municipalities outsourced, but he said he had support for the fact that, you know, if they have the skill set, then they can provide all the services that we're looking for. So I would say to the board, ask Mr. Talbot when he's in here. He's certainly very knowledgeable.
I'm going to just put this out there, whether or not it's right, wrong, or indifferent. I really am already sold. I think we can easily support $43,000 and get rid of a salt shed that we don't necessarily need, and I think the long-term financial stability of this town way outweighs the short-term salt shed. Even if the salt shed gets put off 4 or 5 years, in the big scheme of things, the financial security of this town is way more important. And it's obviously been run amok for the past few years. I say that very loosely. I think it's been run amok for the past 15 years. And I'd really like to get it back on track.
I don't see where we had any problem. I mean, what is that big problem? What's the problem we have now? I haven't seen, we haven't.
The audit will tell us.
We collect our money, we pay our bills, I mean, what's...
The audit will tell us.
We're not deficient on anything.
Apparently we are.
Well, I gotta see that list.
Well, I mean, it's some of the things that we talked about is that, you know, that our in the last year we had to pay a substantial bill for a past debt through the state of Maine, which would be just because it was being accounted for in a non-traditional method. I mean, that was a large bill. It was about $60,000 of unbudgeted funds. You know, that was what brought us to light that there were some issues in our accounting. Come to find out that when we start looking at the fact that there's over expenditures on an annual basis, going back for decades, that aren't accounted for, that's not necessarily illegal.
I know, but you just change, you just change it. I mean, so should give this, new outfit, get a chance, get the audit and everything, get the people work together. We ain't even giving anybody a chance to work anything out yet. I mean, we just changed our audits, and so you haven't given it a chance to work itself out yet.
Well, the auditor doesn't actually do our books. Our auditor makes recommendations
I
on
know,
how we do our
but
books.
You had, we just got a new one, so let the people work with a new one for a while and see what happens.
Well, that's certainly an idea to do, which is going to have negative marks on our
I just
auditors.
can't see spending.
On our
I just can't see spending more money just because we got $50,000 that you think we take in a public hearing, come in and change it from one spot to another. Why we have to do that? I mean, you have a special town meeting. That's going to cost us money to do it.
The reality of it is if we are not in compliance with standard accounting practices, we are doing it wrong.
And not doing
And whose fault is that?
Ours. We've been doing it for 10 years, 15 years.
That's your town manager. Whoever, you had it before, you got a new one in, so that's where it all lies. You know what else I do.
Okay.
So we got a new town manager, so
So-
we work it out.
I understand, but the problem is the town manager, number one, isn't trained to do books. Number two, we didn't hire the town manager to do the books.
You don't have to. I mean, we got people in the office. We can train them to do the books.
we don't have anybody on our staff that's trained in accounting processes.
Well, I
except
gotta see it first.
And maybe when we see I'm with you, Douglas, in that regard. I want to see the audit before I...
Right.
I think the fundamental thing is, the fundamental question is that we've freed up operating space by structural changes. We can make a change to our service without incurring any more cost because we freed up efficiencies in another department. I think that there was an expectation we would be able to bring that back to the people in savings. Essentially, those savings that they may see are less important than having accounting stability.
The thing that keeps coming back in my mind, though, is two things. One is one of the things that you had brought up to us very early in the audit, was our undesignated fund is not as big as what you expected it to be, what we thought it was. You couple that with paying for an everyday expense, i.e. accounting, through taking something from capital. You know what I mean? If we were going to do anything, I would want to take that capital money and put it into our undesignated fund to build that up where it should be again. That makes more sense to me. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't important to keep our books in order, but our undesignated fund is low as well. I mean, we know that now.
Yeah, it's about a month and a half of operating.
Which is nowhere near enough.
Not even close.
Right.
And we were talking about how the undesignated fund was smaller than it should be when we thought it was $300,000, $400,000 bigger. So we knew the undesignated fund was undersized. The real potential is the undesignated fund is so small that there is a fear that you could have to actually borrow money to pay operating funds. We went into a lot of this commitment knowing that we had gaps in our accounting, and still maintain the tax rate, knowing that eventually the Board of Selectmen would do the right thing and make sure that our financials are sound. I'm making the best recommendations I can. You guys can make them.
So without having something in front of me that almost is the smoking gun per se, of telling us we have to do this or else, it's a hard sell for me to spend more money when we need to save more money. Hey, does that make sense? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's personally how I feel.
And what I'm saying is that the town would run at the same price that it did last year, next year. We just have a very different structure. So I don't think our budget, our operating budget will go up at all, because code enforcement and assessing is in the general fund, or in the general government fund, and so is the contract services for admin. So, one goes up, one goes down, they're about the same. It's going to be about the same bottom line, And you're gonna get much different services, but much better services for the same price.
Until I see the audit, I'm not.
Apparently, we've all spoke our own piece, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
we might as well wait until another meeting.
That means I need to get on the management's discussion and analysis, which I just haven't had time.
You wouldn't want to can't take a vote tonight because you know pass it anyway, so.
Is that a vote, Douglas? That sounds like a no vote.
Well,
I mean, if you're looking for my opinion, essentially, if the board doesn't act on it, I still gave my best recommendation.
yeah.
So, I mean, if the board doesn't act on Osmond and Page's proposal, which I think is our best avenue, then we'll make do and we'll find another avenue.
So-
It'll just take longer and more effort.
Without the audit, you have the draft now. Why can't we set up a meeting with him at our next meeting? And he can give us, will he do that without the actual audit in front of him?
I doubt it. I mean, a good auditor is going to want to have his formal audit in front of you before he actually talks about it. And he still probably reserves the right to say that it says in big bold letters draft on the side of it. Until he gets my management discussion and analysis, the audit isn't complete, which that is a part of the audit. The only reason why the MD&A is not done at this point is because it took longer than usual to do the audit, which is something that we said when you have bad accounting, it takes longer to do an audit. And then secondly, we've got a lot of tasks, so I haven't done the MD&A, which I've only had in my possession for a few weeks, 2 weeks.
So an interesting stat to know when the time comes would be, I mean, we know what it's going to cost for the accounting firm to do it on a yearly basis. What would it cost us to train current staff between covering when they're going to school and school costs? What would that cost us? If we decided not to go with that accounting and say we want to train staff to do this, what would it cost us?
Yeah, substantially less. It would take a lot longer to
Right.
produce a result.
Right. But we'd also have to worry about covering the office while they're gone. So I
Absolutely.
mean, that's going to be a cost. I mean, that would be an interesting number to have, I suppose.
Yeah, and I'm not sure one that we could come up with precision, but we could take some good shots at it. That's why we've offered this proposal. It's a pretty easy swipe at a really big solution.
Yep, we have
I'm
two.
gonna just interject. I think there's two things I think overall, which is you can't really look at it in terms of why do we incur the cost? Because I think that analogy is more like if you're driving a truck, you don't want to fix the brakes until you actually have a head-on collision, and then you say, okay, let's go ahead and fix the brakes right now. So I think that's number one. Number two, as far as training in-house staff, you're really looking at sending people to a four-year college and basically having them go and get experience for 15, 20 years in different aspects of accounting before they can come back and actually do the functions that we're talking about. So I think it's again, we're still not talking apples to apples in terms of what the service is. I mean, we're looking strictly at it from a point of view that it's a bill comes in and we're just going to cut a check to pay the bill. But that's really 10% of the job. And what you're liking right now is the remaining 80 or 90% of it, which from a pure bookkeeping, it's not apples to apples. I mean, you're looking at things that are more complex and sophisticated, in terms of the need and the skill set than just writing a check and paying the bill. So I think that's just the one to make sure that we clarify that, because the approach of trying to do it in-house, so you're really looking at establishing an accounting department in-house. You need a controller, you need a senior accountant, a bookkeeper, and staff accountant. So
This is a much easier discussion to have in January when you're trying to plan your budget for the following year. That's when you have the arguments on, do we want to raise the budget, is it going to keep it flat? But when you're in the middle of it, on an already set budget, that makes it a little tougher.
And 50% of the fixes, we didn't have anything else on the table. The town manager could probably take a pretty good lofty shot at fixing most of those items, about 50% of them. And then there's other ones that we can't actually fix. The segregation of duties. I mean, we gotta get inventive now, and I'm not really sure if we have a process yet, but, you know, essentially, the segregation of duties are only most important when you have messy bookkeeping, messy accounting. They'd be less of an important aspect if the books were precision kept. You know, the auditor comes in and spends half a day and walks away, then I think they'll let it slide, that segregation of duties are less than ideal.
They probably are in 95% of the town office in the state. Really? John?
A couple things. The segregation of duties, we had that same problem being a small, you know, governmental agency, and that really kind of went away. Because it's, now we're physically apart and we have structure in there. For a relatively low cost, I have a CPA at my disposal. I'm not trying to pump them up per se, but you can't, what Doug what suggested, you can't do. You won't get the same level of service, it just won't happen. And we were the truck that the brakes failed, to be quite honest with you. The brakes failed and we slammed into a wall. And the turnaround was so fast, immediate, and so good, and at a very reasonable cost. It was, you don't want to be that truck that slams into the wall. You know,
Although I have a strange feeling the audit's going to tell us that we're already there.
Probably.
It's just a harder wall to understand.
And the audit costs. I don't know what you pay for an audit, but the minute you get your books in order and you have a track record, your audit costs, ours will cut in half. Because they won't have to mess around reconstructing things and doing stuff like that.
Ours is probably gonna cost us $3,000 more than we anticipated, because now we have to actually pay for them to come and do consulting on how to fix the things that we found wrong, so.
So what was the audit, how much did the audit cost us?
Originally $9,000 was the estimate. We're gonna pay probably in the neighborhood of $12,000–13,000.
It's a 30-year cost taken care of right there. I'm just.
Yeah, I don't expect for the Board of Selectmen to absorb the enormous aspect of having this audit. I mean, I think take your time.
We need an audit.
You need an audit of your audit.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jim. Need an audit.
That's it. Oh, we've already done the Boothbay Water District Southport merger. So we're on to new business, which would be the Almer Fund application.
Thank you. In front of you, we just received today, we wanted to turn it around as fast as possible, an application for Myron Hahn for Almer Fund, seeking $2,000. There's about $76,000 in the fund, which 50% of that is seed, so we can spend $26,000 of that fund. It's the only applicant we've had this year, so I'm recommending that the board approve this application for $2,000 for Myron Hahn for the Almer Fund. You should have this small essay explaining the significance of his application. From what I understand, it's probably about a $12,000 cost of the actual school, so this would pay just under 20% of the cost.
I'm certainly all for it. I'll make a motion that
We did $1,300 last year for an applicant.
You made a motion.
to approve $2,000 to Myron Hahn for the Madeline L. Almer Fund.
No discussion. All those in favor? It may not hurt to take this chance to tell TV Land about what it is, maybe? I mean, can you give a brief, in case there's other kids from Boothbay that might be interested?
Absolutely. I don't have all of the information about the Madeline Alburn Fund in front of me, but probably about 15 years ago, some money was gifted to the town through a will from Madeline L. Ulmer. It consisted of $50,000. The money is supposed to be used to assist a worthy boy or girl from the town of Boothbay in completing his or her high school education. We found out in the last 2 years that it's pretty not a well-known scholarship fund. We're trying to make some information to give to maybe the guidance counselors so that this is more well-known, that this scholarship is available. But usually about once a year, the Board of Selectmen entertain applications. Right now, since there's no structure to it, we'd receive applications at any time for any worthy boy or girl. But with the fact that the Ulmer Fund has been underutilized in the last few years, that it's grown, so the Board of Selectmen can use all of the interest in the Ulmer Fund. Right now, that's about, well, $26,000 minus the $2,000 that you've awarded today. So it's sizable. So if there's any parents or children out there that need assistance that live in the town of Boothbay, the Ulmer Fund is a pretty easy application to get some assistance with.
They must live in just Boothbay, right?
Yes, they have to be Boothbay residents. You know, with children, I think that you can make the case that if one of their parents live in Boothbay, then they're. But I don't think we've ever been forced to make that determination. But yes, they have to be Boothbay residents.
Public comment? Public, oh, okay.
I just like to ask if Mr. Chausis could elaborate just a little bit on why it is that he doesn't recommend that the selectmen know about the proceedings. You know, it's all out in public knowledge already, and I'm sure everyone, you know, has a pretty good understanding of what's going on. So I wonder if you could.
I think the natural inclination of an elected official is to put their thought process on what they think about the proceedings, which at this point in time would just impair their ability to vote later when there is a question asked of them whether it should go to the next level of enforcement. To keep that option open, to keep the Board of Selectmen away from the discussion as much as possible. I mean, they're obviously going to see what is public. They're obviously going to be able to contact me and find out the information that is public. But to keep their opinions apparently to themselves as much as possible until they're forced to do that, because they may have to do that in the future. It's generally a best practice in most municipalities.
Is this something that's commonly done?
Yeah, I mean, essentially that's, if there wasn't as much publicity to this particular notice of violation, the Board of Selectmen may not even be privy to it until it gets to the point of having the code enforcement officer bring it to their attention. I'd rather not have this appeal or this particular notice of violation get any different treatment than any other appeal. Does that answer the question?
I think so. I guess I just don't know enough about the situation.
So if the appeal is upheld, the next step would be come to the Board of Selectmen to have action to go through the court proceedings to apply the violation. Essentially, court proceedings to incur fines, penalties, or action.
But we're not. I mean, we've already complied with the notice of violation in every aspect, so it's not really an enforcement issue right now. It's more an interpretation of the law issue.
Right, and at this time, there's no reason why the Board of Selectmen needs to act. Essentially, the appeal process hasn't been fulfilled at this point. So I'm just asking the Board of Selectmen to be patient, which I know their first inclination is to probably have an opinion. And they are elected officials.
I will say, I apologize just for the shunning here. It's not that none of us don't want to speak. We're just trying to play by the same rules everybody else plays by.
It wouldn't be fair to you folks or the town if I sat here and gave you an opinion that I thought the town was right. whereas it wouldn't be fair to the townspeople if I gave you an opinion that I thought you was right. You know what I mean? So,
Right. So I'm not so worried about whether you're giving an opinion, but whether you are allowed to have all the information that's available about the whole case.
I think,
It's a very complicated.
I mean, I think you did a pretty good job on the news. I saw that.
Yeah.
So, other than that, what I've read in the paper, letters to the editor,
Right.
that's really,
Everyone pretty much
but that's, you know what I mean, I other than that, I don't think that it would be fair to you folks or the townspeople to delve into it. I don't come down and pick Jim's brain and say, geez, you know, how come this, or how come that? I don't think that's fair. I think that time may come, you know, and I wish you folks well with your appeal. I hope you get something worked out, and other than that, I hope it don't come to us. That's my hope.
Yeah. And I had another question about the whole process of instigating the ordinance change. My understanding is that it can happen 3 ways with either the selectmen or the planning board or by a petition. Am I correct about that?
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
The Board of Selectmen essentially controls the annual town meeting warrant, so they can make suggestions to questions at their own will because they control the town meeting warrant. Another way to affect the town meeting warrant is by ordinance. The planning board has the ability to make recommend changes to the zoning ordinance alone to the Board of Selectmen. And then the third option, what you discussed, is by petition. And
Right.
petition is not only the zoning ordinance, but any question that the people deem necessary, that they don't think the Board of Selectmen has addressed themselves. Essentially, petitions are only necessary when the Board of Selectmen is not necessarily being receptive to the to the question.
Because I'm sure you're probably all aware that I have invited through the media for people to sign a petition that we would like to put together, and I just wanted to mention that was in no way intended to go around either the planning board or the selectmen. It was more that I wanted to show that there was a lot of public support for allowing home-based businesses and
Understood.
okay.
Yep.
How many what is it, the last gubernatorial, is that how it works?
It's 10% of the last gubernatorial election,
Right.
Which we could get that number pretty quickly from Bonnie. I'm gonna guess in the neighborhood of 350, maybe more. I mean, I don't know right off the top of my head, but it's never usually an insurmountable amount of people. I mean, think about it. Even if it's double that, 600, it's 10%, 60 people. It's not an insurmountable people to get a petition to the Board of Selectmen. And then also, I'd like to add that all the dealings that we've had with Mr. Stimson has been civil. We've never had any problems with Mr. Stimson, and although we have a difference of how the ordinance reads and differences of opinion and enforcement versus perceived violation and all that, every time we've ever had to deal with Mr. Stimson, it's been a pleasure to work with. So I apologize that it's been not always a pleasure for you.
I have a question.
We'd like to get back to work.
Let's say he gets the signatures for the petition, does that then go before a town meeting?
It goes to the Board of Selectmen for inclusion in the annual town meeting warrant, which would go to town meeting.
Okay.
The petition is to the Board of Selectmen to add the question.
But wouldn't you have to, someone would still have to draft an ordinance.
Yes.
And from what I understand, if we did the petition, it would have to include the exact wording for the ordinance as it would be changed.
It would seem as though it would have to.
Yeah, usually petitions are supposed to
It
be.
can't just be, we get a bunch of people to sign, we want the petition changed.
Right.
It has to have the exact.
Yeah. No, and we talked about it earlier today about how the town would certainly like to work with you on your particular zone, on what you think would work best, and try to come to some semblance of some proper ordinance or doing zoning ordinance amendments. Not saying that we can represent all of your thoughts in a change to zoning ordinance, but we certainly are asking everybody that we can get input from as we design zoning ordinance amendments.
It would make sense. I mean, if you put a petition together, the soonest it could be would be annual town meeting. It would make sense to work closely with Art and or the planning board
Right.
to have something drafted to put in there, and you wouldn't have, that would save you from having to go out and get petition signatures and all that. You put
Right.
your energy there instead
Sure,
of,
exactly.
so.
It's just, but an interesting side effect is just the unbelievable outpouring of public support. I've gotten, every day I get dozens of phone calls, emails, people coming up to our house and just saying, how can we help, So I know that there's, the public wants there to be, they want the home businesses to continue to be allowed and not, not have the restrictions of the ordinance apply to people, as long as the neighbors and the butters are protected properly.
As a side note, or maybe a humorous note, I couldn't agree with you more. I've heard the same thing. I walked into Hammond Lumber the other day, totally unaware of this whole situation, and I would have just as soon stepped into a bee's nest. So yes, the outpouring is there.
Yeah.
But
So, the
I would
question
like
is,
to
how can
think-
we get from here to there?
I would like to think that there can be a mutual, it's gonna take give on both sides, but
Mhm.
to get it over and past so you folks can go back to work, I wish you well. I do. I can't just say that enough.
I mean, it really is the last, the town of Boothbay reserves things like notice of violations, stop work, penalties, and enforcement action for moments where we can't come to other means of compliance issues. So they are not the first attempt to work with compliance. They're usually the last attempts.
I have an issue with that, which is that the notice of violation was our first response to a letter that was asking to be able to agree on a venue for how we could resolve the issue. The very first communication we got from the town after that letter was the notice of violation. So I don't feel as though it was a last-ditch thing myself.
It was a second response
Right.
in our case.
So I feel that we haven't really been allowed due process.
The attorneys took over a lot of the correspondence. I mean, honestly,
Right.
after it became, after it stopped, at one point in time, it was you and I coming up with terms on the hood of my truck at your place of business. After we came up with that, what that looked like, it then became attorneys contacting attorneys.
Can I just ask a very simple and subtle question?
Sure.
You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but it sounds like to me that something so simple can be taken care of instead of paying lawyers. Nobody likes to pay lawyers.
Right.
We know they charge way too much for too little. It seems to me that it can just be hammered out and be done with it. But
That would be great. And
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
But the town can't necessarily negotiate one-sided with a very skilled attorney. That would be
no, I agree.
that would be taking too much upon the liabilities of the town.
I agree.
So, I mean, when somebody does obtain a very skilled attorney, it's in the town's best interest for us to have our very skilled attorney then discuss those parameters with
You don't want to bring a knife to a gunfight.
Right.
Right.
I am not an attorney. I don't even play one on Channel 7.
I would just like to think that between you and you could get in, somehow get on the same page. And maybe that's not possible. I don't know all the details, but it seems so simple.
We're working on it.
Good.
Yeah.
We had
You're-
some discussion today.
We're employing the advice of an attorney because we don't know how to read the laws otherwise.
Right.
I mean, we can read them,
Mhm.
but the town has an attorney, so we should be able to talk to somebody who is trained in law. We're not going for the jugular.
No, I just hate to see you guys go broke paying attorney's fees. That's what I mean. I don't mean
Right.
that at all.
To us, it
Right.
felt
And then
necessary.
our taxes go up too because the town's paying for
Right,
it. So we
yeah,
get
it's
a
kind of a double
whammy,
whammy, right.
Yeah.
That's why
That's
I'd
the
like
last
to
thing
think
we
that you
want.
folks could, between the town manager and you folks, could manage something
Yeah.
without having to pay attorneys all kinds of money, that's all.
And the discussion we had today is that, obviously with the time left, Mr. Stimson has to file for his appeal. If he doesn't, he'll lose his opportunity to do so. Before his appeal hearing date, hopefully we can have a little bit more discussion.
You said the consent agreement though is still on the table, right?
Yeah, we never said the consent agreement came off the table.
Okay. But you would have to redraft it at all?
There would definitely have to be some new aspects added. I mean, just a legal aspect of the fact that there's an appeal there, and that there is a notice of violation. We have to be some wording that covered those items. And then I also, in fairness to Mr. Stimson and his business, the dates that he said now are probably not still valid.
So I'm going to venture into probably places where, but the question remains is why can't you get a consent agreement to put you back to work and then work with the planning board to get the ordinance changed and not have to worry about it?
That's what I've been asking all along. And I don't know why it couldn't have happened that way.
Well, and that's what we're discussing right now, is a consent agreement. I mean, the town doesn't really want Stimson Marine to be out of work. I don't even want to pretend that I understand how Mr. Stimson runs his business. It's a very large boat. I'm sure that the business is very complicated and something that I wouldn't even want to understand. So I can't imagine sitting dormant right now is a good business model. So the town wants Stimson Marine back to work, but it needs to be within the parameters of the zoning ordinance. If the town of Boothbay loosens the zoning ordinance, they're going to regret it someday.
There's a million questions I want to ask.
I know.
Not that I can or should.
Me too, right?
So please understand.
Yeah, we understand totally, don't worry.
Okay.
Our time to ask questions will come.
Yeah,
Hopefully it won't.
That's right, yeah.
Right.
I wish you folks well, and I hope it works out.
Thank
I
you.
do.
Thank you.
That's it for public comment, I assume? So, review warrants and sign. You want to make that motion? To review upon?
Make a motion with you?
No. Make the motion to review the warrants and sign them upon review.
So be it.
Seconded.
No discussion? All those in favor?
Now I'll make a motion with
Adjourn.
adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Yeah.